It is 6 p.m. We are the PoP Baking Club. Welcome. My name is Kathleen, and every Wednesday I do a lecture and demonstration of a recipe my viewers pick. So right now we are doing the Scott's Pastry Shop 1970s cutout butter cookie, and it's on my link tree under cookies. Is tonight's cookie a butter cookie or sugar cookie? It's kind of not. It's kind of not either, and that's why we'll talk about all of it. It's not a misleading recipe. It's actually a very unique recipe. Let's just get into it. Let's do it right now. My name is Kathleen. I'm a certified executive pastry chef, and I teach on social media, TikTok, Substack, and YouTube. I taught at the college level, and I've been in the industry since I was 15. I've been in baking for years and years and years, and if I could get off the subject, I would, but I can't. And I tend to focus on ingredient function, understanding how time, temperature, and moisture affect and need to be considered when working in baking. And I teach best practices because the practice of pastry is about doing something every day to the best of your ability in a methodical way, building good habits and practices that will give you better results down the road. And I believe the way we practice in the kitchen is how we practice in life. So we're gonna talk about tonight a cookie that I love. It's called the Scott's Pastry Shop. I mean, they would call it a butter cookie. But I want to give a little bit of background on what this cookie represents, because to me, it's a nostalgic Midwestern cookie. It's a cookie that would have been made in a bakery in Detroit, where I grew up, in Chicago, in Milwaukee, and many other places. But when people my age or older think of those bakeries back in our childhood, we think of things like a Bismarck and how it was crunchy and kind of shattered a little bit on the outside, but was tender. That you would buy a dinner roll and it would stay soft for 3 days. Or you would go into this bakery that ran 24 hours a day. They were typically family owned, and the bakery case would go on forever. And you would go from cookies and muffins and bread into other things and pies, and there would be seasonal things. You could go in and get all your traditional butter cookies at the holidays, Spritz cookies, things like that. I'm trying to think of, and decorated cakes. But one of the things that made these bakeries so memorable were hydrogenated fats. And I am not a scientist. Hydrogenated fats were designed, and we still have them, but back in the day, they had trans fats in them. And they were designed to be miracles in the kitchen. They held more moisture and more sugar than butter or anything else. And they basically took liquid fats and turned them into solids. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, these bakeries were huge. And they defined a generation, and they were highly processed. In the 90s, people started hearing about bad cholesterol and trans fats, and then in the early 2000s, they were banned. And when I tell you the ripple effect this decision had on the baking industry was enormous. I mean, I can recall in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Bakers Association having forums and meetings. Everybody had to reformulate their cakes, icings, their fry oil, and everything. And these ingredients, they released smells, like vanilla smells. They tasted a certain way. They lingered on the tongue. They did things that no other ingredient can do. And we equate them with home bakery. But the truth of the matter is they were very chemical and they weren't good for us. So we've long since made the switch. But this cookie was developed in that sort of, I picked 1970s because that's when I was a kid. And it was developed in that era because of these hydrogenated shortenings and other ingredients that made the cookie barely brown, soft, melt in the mouth, and you could put it in a display case and it would not get dry or hard for a long time. Up to 14 days covered, and then a week in the case. So when they made them basically illegal and they banned them, people had to go back, they had to reformulate their recipes. Some people had to get new equipment. I mean, it was industry disrupting. And if you were an artisan baker, it didn't affect you as much because you were already working with artisan products. You were using technique. So the difference between high production and artisan is that high production uses these chemicals and these ingredients that do a lot of the work so that you don't need as much technique, and they're cheaper, and they have longer shelf life, and which means they stay moist longer, and a lot of other things. They're very sweet, very enjoyable. The artisan baker uses technique and whole ingredients like butter, cream, eggs, etc., and executes them, and these kinds of products don't last as long. Many artisan bakeries sell everything that day, and at the end of the day, someone comes and picks up the leftover to be given to a food pantry or somewhere to be utilized, because the philosophy is you make everything fresh every day. When I found this cookie in Madison, Wisconsin in the 90s, I don't know, I've been thinking about it a lot. Did it give me a memory as a child that really hit me? Because it really hit me like a ton of bricks. I needed to know what it was and what it was made out of. And it was basically a type of cookie that was everywhere, but it was dipped in, instead of royal icing, almond coating. But it's not almond. It's really hydrogenated fats that allowed that cookie to stay moist, and it gave it a nice crunch and a nice sheen. And then they would take roll icing and do the decorating, and this was this combination that I absolutely loved. So then I worked at this bakery, as I have said, and this woman who owned the bakery, Jackie Scott, gave me the recipe. And the original recipe was a 30-pound recipe. I am going to talk about this cookie tonight and what makes it unique. And it is not like if you make a sugar cookie or a butter cookie and you cover it in royal icing. It's designed so that every bit of it stays stable, stays moist, soft, and tender, and it doesn't migrate. So in other words, if you've ever made a sugar cookie that's very soft and you put royal icing on there, or you put royal icing that's been dyed red, you'll see migration. That red will migrate to the cookie, and whichever one has more moisture will go to the other because of their sugar content. With this cookie, that doesn't happen with the cookie. I'm going to be using candy melts, which are a modern incantation of the old almond bark without the hydrogenated fats, and it has its own ingredient functions and benefits and drawbacks, which I'll discuss. And then I have bucket icing or roll icing that's donut icing, and I will explain each one of these ingredients and why they're perfect for this cookie. Just so you know, it is not a healthy cookie. If you asked me to make a party favor cookie for an event, for a wedding, a wow showstopper cookie that you are going to be bagging and tying with a pretty ribbon and putting at the door for people to leave on their way out of the event, this is always going to be the cookie I recommend for many, many reasons. I have been making it since 1993, and I share this recipe with you because it is a modern version of sort of a time capsule of what used to be an Americana staple. So we call it a butter cookie. It is the Scott's Pastry Shop butter cookie that's decorated. But there are these elements to it that cause me to have it, make me have this long, long name for it, because it's more of a descriptor. If you are opposed to ingredients that are made in a chemist lab and they're not healthy and that sort of thing, this is not the cookie for you. But if you eat just one like I do, I believe in having a little bit and enjoying it. I think that this cookie is the perfect option for your one showstopper in your holiday box. I think if you're running a business and doing big events, corporate events, this cookie can handle anything. So I think it's a really great product to add to your repertoire. It's just not as fussy. So if you're looking for ease, this is the cookie. And we will be mixing it, baking it, cutting it, covering it, and decorating it all tonight. When I do a recipe, I do a deep dive deconstruction of the history, the desired outcome, the ingredient function, the synergy of the ingredients, because you have each individual ingredient and the things that live in it and what it does in this recipe. But then I put how they react to one another, because they're not inert. They work together. These are still fats that are called designer fats because we're using sweet tex, we're using non-fat milk solids, which are milk powder, 10x instead of sucrose, and we're using pastry flour at 8% protein. So we are using ingredients in a way that is so clever. And what I'd like you to do is, while I'm lecturing and demoing, I want you to think about sugar cookies, butter cookies, shortbread cookies, icings that you use. How do you make a royal icing soft? Well, you might add corn syrup or glucose syrup or glycerin. All of these things are connected, and I want you to make the connections in your own baking so that you can take this recipe and learn as much from each ingredient as possible. So tonight we're looking at ingredients, how they function, how they're used together, and why. And I will explain to you what these ingredients are, and then you can begin to make connections, because some of these ingredients are a little unfamiliar and interesting. And I think that this recipe is a really nice bridge between what we know as a home baker, which is very artisan. Unless you're buying a cookie mix out of a box, which is closer to what this recipe is, you don't maybe have a lot of experience with industrial production cookies that are meant to be easily executed, very consistent, last a long time, be sweet and soft, and all the wonderful stuff. So I do this cookie because in production, you can stack it almost immediately because the donut icing crusts up very quickly. You can get it all done like in one day, especially if you've sheeted out your dough or cut it out and frozen it. So if you need to do 500 cookies, 1,000 cookies, you can literally get this kind of an order done in 2 days. I mean, in one day if you want to do a full day on it, but easily in the course of 2 days. The recipe that I gave you, it's a 500-gram batch. This is the recipe that you will find on the link tree, and it has the recipe ingredients. This is the standard formula, and this is a 20-pound batch. So of course we're not going to use that. So I brought this down by percentage down to a 5.59 size. That's almost 6% of the original size. And these ingredients all shifted their amounts. So this is the column that we're using to execute tonight's cookie. And then these are the baker's percentage. And baker's percentage is based on the pastry flour, which is 100%. And you will want to look at the other ingredients and where they are in terms of percentage to the flour. So when I say this has almost 26% powdered sugar to flour, that gives you an indication of how the powdered sugar is being used. And then like the butter is 20%, but the sweet text shortening is 30%. So that's not 50-50. We're using more shortening than butter. And how are butter and shortening different? We're going to talk about all that in a very natural way as I move through making this cookie. I am going to start with a quick fit check. I'm going to pull my hair back, and then we're going to pull one of the sheets of cookie dough that I've already made, and I'm going to cut it and talk about my cutters and how to cut properly. And then I want to get those in the oven, because once they're done baking, and they bake very quickly, you bake them until the color just kind of creeps up the edges, and you pull them and you let them sit on the tray until they cool. And then I'm going to show you how quickly we can dip and ice them. And I don't know if they'll be ready to go in a bag, but they should be pretty close. So we're going to do the whole thing, and you're going to see how fast it goes. Oh, you can decorate a lot of cookies as long as you have a good plan. And you need to keep it moving. You need to have a sense of urgency. And, you know, I've worked at places where they've said, so-and-so, you know, we had someone do it last year. We didn't make any money on the cookies because the person took so long. And it's like, yeah, you can't, you know, these beautiful cookies you see on the internet, on TikTok, and where they're doing a lot of detail, those are not the kinds of cookies that are going to be profitable in a bakery setting. You're going to have to get a cookie decorated in 15 to 30 seconds and move to the next. And that's why we work in somewhat of a factory style. The assembly line style, you do all of the cutting, all of the baking, all of the dipping, all of the piping, and then all the bagging, all the tying of the bows, and the boxing up. So you do each stage all the way. So you have to have a really good plan, and you have to find out how much dough you're going to need. You have to scale all your ingredients accurately, get them all ready, and mix them, sheet them out, and you can get them in the freezer or the fridge to get them firm enough to cut. You can do this cookie dough if you want for the holidays now, and you can cut out the shapes you like or leave them sheeted and stacked between parchment in the freezer, wrapped nice and tight. So this is a very production-friendly recipe. And you learn to dip very quickly. I worked for a woman who did hand-painted royal icing cookies, and I was the dipper. And boy, do you get good. And so I know a lot of times people outline it and flow fill it and all that, but really a good dip and whatever. And if you don't worry about it, and you know that each one doesn't need to be perfect, because by the time you get the decoration on and you bag it, no one's gonna know. It's like a cake. You see all the mistakes, but no one else will. And that's the truth, because I am a perfectionist, but sometimes if you let things go, you find out that it's perfectly fine. If you guys wait right here, I'm gonna go do my hair over there so I'm not near the food. I'll be right back. All right, and I have a sanitation bucket I'm gonna use to clean my hands. Typically, I would have a sink, but I don't work where there is a sink, which is very unfortunate. I'm going to start with my clean apron. I always wear a clean apron when I work. These are very inexpensive, $5 white kitchen aprons. And I work for cleanliness and safety. I'm not as concerned about how I look as I am about being efficient and clean and representing a professional atmosphere. No fingernail polish, short nails, no jewelry, minimal makeup, and my hair is up. I wear clogs in the kitchen, but there are many, many styles. You want to find something that's safe and does not slip and slide. So I'm going to take this sanitizer water and just sanitize my countertop and get ready to work. All right, let me go get my cookie dough and I'll be right back. Okay. I love a half sheet tray, and a half sheet tray can fit in a home oven and a home refrigerator freezer. And I buy half sheet bun bags called a bun bag, B-U-N. And they are reusable. It's a little damp on the inside, so what I do is just turn it inside out so it can dry out, because the moisture that lived inside the cookie dough has now migrated to the bag, which is interesting. I made this yesterday. It's been in the refrigerator. It's very firm. And I will show you how I make it, how I roll it out, and how I get it onto these two parchments. I'm gonna pull this onto my countertop. I'm gonna let it sit a second, because when cookie dough comes out of the refrigerator, it's very firm and hard to cut. And this is a small 500-gram disc, which is the size of the recipe that I'm doing tonight. I'll be demoing the whole thing after I get these cut and in the oven, because we need a couple cookies to decorate. But I'm using this column, and these amounts of the ingredients went into this piece. So this is how big yours will be. And while it might seem basic, I'm going to teach you how to cut cookies. And I've taught a lot of people and I've watched a lot of people, and there tends to be a lot of waste. So we are going to get the very most out of this cookie dough and the most cookies that I possibly can. Now, we moved, as some of you know, and I decided to not bring along my entire cookie collection, and I'm already frustrated because I had a big leaf cookie for the fall that I don't have here. These are the only ones I kept. And what I can recommend to you, if you do not have a cookie business where you have tons and tons of shapes, I recommend that instead of thinking of a shape that's very, very specific, and this is just an example. I have cookies that are cutters that are shaped like wheelbarrows or lighthouses, things like that. That will require that when you go to decorate it, you have to be very precise and you have to really come up with a plan and know how to handle the bag. But if you do something really simple, you can do dots and lines and zigzags and squiggles, and you can get a really great effect. I use very simple lines to keep it very easy. And to come up with those ideas, you just need to scour the internet and keep it very simple. You don't need an outline, you need contrast. So if I do these in gingerbread and I use blue or white or red, any dots or lines that I make will stand out. I don't need to fill in the blank because my eyes fill in the blank. So what I recommend is that you keep it simple. And I have a lot of these collections. So I buy sets, and if you buy commercial grade, from Ateco, this is what I recommend. Get a set and think about the shape and how you can kind of turn it into something else. These are rounds, and these are by Motfer. Motfer is a very popular brand, and they're made out of very firm plastic, meaning brittle and strong. One thing I speak of is if you are going to be doing fancy cookies and selling them or giving them as gifts, I really like 3 cookies, all the same shape or the same color or similar, and do them in, let's say, 3 sizes. And then this goes into the bag and it becomes a little set of 3. So you have very similar, and so it just makes everything simple. The other thing is I'm thinking ahead, because when I use a large cookie cutter to cut my dough and I have scraps, it might be nice to be able to take this one and get all in between and use everything up, because I don't want to re-roll things that could be utilized. and I'm getting more out of it. And that's kind of how I think. How can I get the most out of every single time I touch an ingredient? I need to get the most out of it so that I maintain quality and control. I love the snowflakes. Here are squares that are fluted. It's called fluting. That's when you have that ruffled edge, and you can buy these in squares, straight or fluted. This is my favorite of all time, this cookie cutter, but it's kind of flimsy. So when you buy cookie cutters, some of them are very bendable, and that's not good if you're doing 500 cookies. Some of them have metal on the top, and it's also not good because it hurts your hands eventually. So that's why when you spend the money on a commercial grade cookie cutter, what you're getting is not only consistency and a really good quality cutter that's not going to bend or fall apart on you, but you're getting a ridge here. And this ridge allows you to hold on nicely, cut, and not hurt your hands as much. It's a little more forgiving. So the rigidity of this is going to give me a really nice clean cut. And then I don't know if you can see, but it's thicker here than it is here. So this gives you a very nice, thin, sharp cut without being sharp. It doesn't need to be metal. It doesn't need to be really sharp. It just needs to be precise and of a really good product. So this guy has this side on. This is so nice to have this. This is welded. This is a very old cookie cutter I bought years ago. Your hand will always feel comfortable no matter how many cookies you make with this guy. I, years ago, had cookie cutters made. Custom cookie cutters, and I used old-fashioned postcards as the example, and all I did was draw a line on a piece of paper, and a copper cookie cutter custom maker bent it to fit. So these become really fun plaques, just fun. I can use them for anything. You can put people's names on them, and they can just represent other things. They could be a name card. There's a lot of ways you can use rectangles and circles, and I utilize as many ideas as I can. All right, so I'm gonna keep the round fluted out. These cookies are designed to be baked on a sheet pan, not on a Silpat. One of the goals of this cookie is that when it's baked, it doesn't puff very much, and it doesn't lose its shape. So we wanna keep it very light in color, very sharp corners, not a lot of puff, and we're going to do that through our mixing method, our ingredient choice, and baking it when it's very cold. So I've already waited long enough. I'm going to get this in the oven. So this parchment that I had covering is going to go here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. I think I'll do, well, you have to put all of the same size on here. So I think I'll do one size on here, and then maybe some smaller ones on a different. So the trick to cutting dough is that you want to get above it. You aren't looking at it and just doing this. You have to be above, and this cookie cutter needs to be all the way to the edge. Sometimes it's almost as if you're going over the edge, but you're not. It'll squeeze in. Your goal is to get hardly anything between these and to use absolutely all of it. And even if I put the cutter here, this won't fit there. So what I'm gonna do is kind of start with a plan so I can get as many in as possible. I'm gonna push down. I'm gonna slide this and just jiggle this a little bit and pull it up. And this cookie's already getting soft. You want it to come up like this, and then you're going to place it on the tray without touch. That's all you're gonna touch it. And if this is cold enough, and you see how I get above it, make sure that I'm there, but it's all the way to the edge. If it's cold enough, you'll get nice sharp edges and it won't stick. If it starts getting soft, that's when you're gonna have problems. And it is getting soft, so you're gonna have to work much quicker than I am. And I'm gonna place this here. Now these cookies, it's not as imperative to get them as far apart as you would like a chocolate chip cookie, because they're not gonna puff that much. So you can fit quite a few onto your tray. I'm still gonna stagger it for heat distribution. So I'm not going to just keep cutting far away from me. I'm gonna work close to me. I'm gonna transfer these here. 1, 2, 3. Next tray, I'm gonna do a noticeable size smaller, so it would look nice as a grouping. I'm gonna do 1. And you don't need any flour. One of the goals of working with these cookies, when you roll them And when you cut them, and everything that you do is to try not to add any flour. And I will give you some tricks for rolling them out that way. This gets really soft really fast. We're just gonna do 3 cookies on each tray and get these in the oven. But you want these cookies to go in, and the directions state 325 convection. We all know when you have convection and it isn't stated, typically cookies are baked at 350. But if you're using convection, you always bring down the temperature by 25 degrees. So they've already altered that, but I'm not using convection. Nonetheless, this oven runs hot. So you might want to test them. You don't want them to bake super quickly. So I am trying to have the oven around 325 or 330. And it looks like we're doing pretty well. So I'm gonna put those in there, and I'm going to set the timer. I'm gonna say 7 minutes. Start, okay. 7 minutes. And then I'm gonna put these cookies onto that tray I had and get them in the freezer to show you how quickly they freeze. So the trick to handling dough is that you cut it, handle it when it's really, really cold. And if you freeze this dough and you want to cut your sheets, you can do that, but just leave it, let it slap for a moment. So let me do a couple big ones. And again, you want to get above it, cut it, pull it on the countertop, pull everything away, check it, and then place it without touching it a lot. And it should stay nice and clean. And this may not seem like rocket science, but if you are doing this in any capacity where waste is in the form of not just ingredients or making a mistake or ruining something, it's time. And so if you make all this dough and then you have so much scrap dough that you could have made a lot more cookies, or you have to re-roll it and quality suffers, to me that's time, and time is money. So then I would take smaller cutters and get as many as them as I could. As many cookies as I can out of here. And sometimes those cookies become the treats that you give people that aren't necessarily for the main show, but they're for people that do work around your shop or your house that you want to share or just to have and to taste. I always have little cookie guys around, even if that's not part of the plan. All right, so even these, I could take little small ones and do a couple more cookies. And these are going in the freezer, so it doesn't matter if they're perfect in terms of, I don't care what size they are. And you can re-roll this dough, I would say 1 time, but that would be it, in my opinion. Okay, I think that might be it. And if I were doing sheets and sheets and sheets of this, so you're not working it a lot, and then when you get everything together, you can give it a little bit of a mix without using your hands. You can just use a sill pad or a parchment, and then you can sheet it back out and use it the last time, and it won't be too tough. But this is what I do. This goes off to the side, and it won't dry out because it's now encapsulated in the parchment. All of my cookie cutters would get washed. And this is the sort of thing you don't want to just throw in dish. You want to make sure that they're hand washed and that you keep track of them. Definitely want to take care of them. And I really like the cases. And personally, I like the cases that are clear, so you don't have to open everything. So those are in the oven. I'm going to throw these in the freezer, and we're going to go take a peek at our cookies real quick. So see, I just have a home freezer. So go in there, and we'll see what's going on here. Let's see. Okay. So they're getting shiny, little fat release. Let me turn this up I'm gonna turn it up to 325. So we're still at 3 minutes. All right. So now we're gonna mix some dough, and then I'm gonna show you how to roll it out. And I'm gonna show you how I do a lot of them. And while we're mixing it, we'll talk about the ingredients. These are my ingredients, and I'm gonna show you one of the first things in here that's really odd. This is a 50-pound box of Sweetex. Sweetex is a high ratio shortening. And it does things that butter cannot do, and it is not like Crisco or regular shortening. It's got emulsifiers in it. And I'm not a scientist, but emulsifiers hold and attract fat and water. And most things don't. They, like, if you put vinegar and oil together, they're going to separate. But if you put an emulsifier in there, then they'll be able to commingle. That's what this does. So icing shortening is wonderful for making American buttercream, and it's great for making this cookie because it holds a lot of moisture, a lot of sugar, and it helps things stay tender and all that sort of thing. But it's inexpensive relative to butter, gives you a long shelf life. In terms of making icings, this will help you get a really sharp edge if you're using a rose tip or a star tip. This is Sweetex brand. So it says 0 trans fat, no hydrogenated oil, no preservatives, and it's made with palm oil. If you buy Alpine, which is a different brand of high ratio icing shortening, I think it's made with some other kind of fat. So if you are against palm oil, this is not your brand, but all you need to do is look at the ingredient labels. This kind of thing you can find at your local cake decorating store. You can find it online, and I have these sources, Cake Deco and whatnot, that sells them in 1 pound, 5 pound amounts, but it's key. We can't live without it. Let me just see what's going on. I don't think we're close, but let's see. Nope. So they're puffing slightly, and that's my fault. You really do need to get them in the oven, and I should have banged them in the freezer for just a minute. All right, upper timer, let's see. Let's do 4 minutes. The thing about Sweetex is it has a higher melting point. So in other words, if you put butter in your hand and close your hand, it's gonna melt in your hand. This isn't. I don't think this starts melting until it gets to around 110 degrees. That makes it easier to work with. It makes it more stable in any environment. And this cookie, which is remarkable, can be stored at room temperature on the counter or in the refrigerator. And it doesn't have a lot of the moisture migration and the problems that you would if you were using natural butter. This is Sweetex giant 50-pound box. I mean, it's not artisan, but in some cases you live in the heat, you know, humidity, or you want a certain result, this is what you need. Sweetex or Alpine. So that's our first main ingredient. This is a 500-gram recipe, the whole thing, the whole yield. And a pound is around 464 grams. So the next time you look at a pound of butter, 464 grams, this is 500. It's not a lot, but it's going to give me enough to show you how to roll it onto a Silpat, a 1/4 inch thick, using rolling guides, and to make this cookie dough really smooth. It's really easy to do. It's the creaming method, but what we want to do tonight is pay attention to these ingredients and not just say creaming method and then turn off our attention. We want to stay focused on, you know, do we have an option to add moisture at this point, or do we have an option to sift or not sift, and why? And I'll go through the ingredients really quickly. I weigh all my ingredients out with a digital scale, and I use a little scale for my little things that are under 20 grams. So the first ingredient on the recipe is 10X. 10X is powdered sugar that's been milled 10 times. I have 63 grams, and it's got a lot of lumps in it. So I'm absolutely going to be sifting this, and this is my sugar. This is my sweetener. This has 3 to 5% cornstarch in it. And if you remember me talking about shortbread cookies, some shortbread cookies use powdered sugar as the sugar. Some use cornstarch to make it more tender. This is doing all of those things at one time, which is great, and giving us sweetness. And then we have unsalted butter, 51 grams, and this is room temp. It's been out all day. I use Plugras right now. It's a European butter. If you use an American butter, it's fine. It just has a little more moisture, but you shouldn't see a dramatic difference in this cookie if you get it in the oven when the dough is very cold. Then we have 76 grams of Sweetex, and you can see just how much more it is than the butter. This is a visual representation of the recipe. And the creaming method is when you take your sweeteners and your fats and you cream them. So this is where they go. I know that I'm going to be creaming these together. After that, I have my pastry flour, 247 grams. This is a King Arthur pastry flour. It is getting harder and harder to find pastry flour at the store. I don't even think you can, and I think Bob's Red Mill has stopped making it, but King Arthur still does. But remember, I don't believe in the title. So even if it says pastry flour, what does that mean? Let's go check on our cookies. The great thing about these cookies is once they come out of the oven, we're good to go, and they'll cool relatively quick. Okay, So what we are looking for literally is to have brown just barely creep up the edges. So I'm gonna come back in 2 minutes, and I might not even bring you with me. So when you look in the oven, you aren't looking for even golden brown color or anything. You barely want that brown to be coming up the edges, that's it. The pastry flour that King Arthur makes is 8% protein. So if you can find out the protein content of your flour, I don't care what the name is. Some all-purpose flours have 8% protein and some have 11. It all depends on your brand. 8% is nice and low. Tender, tender, tender. We want this whole cookie to be very, very tender. The more protein, the more chew. And you cannot make pastry or cake flour by adding cornstarch. Wheat and corn are two different things, and they have different ingredient functions. Cornstarch holds water. That's why we use it to thicken gravy. This has protein in it and starches, and the proteins, they grab on and create chewiness. So we want less chewiness with this cookie. We don't want it to chew like bread. We want it to be tender. And so we have less chewy producing protein. Okay, so after the pastry flour, we have baking soda at 0.4 grams. And believe it or not, my mini scale can do 0.4 grams. And this is baking soda, and baking soda can get very lumpy. So this definitely needs to be sifted. I'm going to sift the 10X separately than I am the dries. My dry ingredients are going to be sifted together. And I have salt, which is 2.4 grams. I'm just using a sea salt, it's fine. If you use kosher, just do it by weight, and it'll be exactly right. NFMS is non-fat milk solids. This is milk powder, 6.3 grams. In order for these cookies to cool quickly, we're going to put them on an open rack with lots of airflow. They will continue to bake on the tray. That's why you need to pull them as soon as brown starts to show. I don't know if you can see, just the edge, you can see, I think, just that tinge of brown is plenty. I think these need 1 more minute. And small ones, they bake more quickly. That's why we don't put different sizes on the same pan. You can have different sizes if you're freezing, but you absolutely cannot if you are, I'm gonna put it here. Do you see how in this rack, it has lots of airflow? That will cool very quickly, which is great. So the larger they are, the slower they bake, and so you don't want a bunch of different sizes. Don't be tempted. People get tempted every day, and it's always gonna bite you. So these are my dries, and then I have the wets. And in this case, we have egg, which is 12, I put 13 grams. Do you see how little? You have to crack an egg, stir it up, and then weigh it on a scale, and I have 13 grams, and I use a mini scale. Doesn't seem like much, but it's irrelevant what I think of the size. It's the right amount, and it goes into this cookie in the right ratio. Milk, and I always use whole milk in the kitchen, in the bake shop, 38 grams. Let me go grab it, I'll be right back. So my first concern would be if they're not baked enough and you go to pick them up, they're going to break. But there are a couple things to think about. One, it's brown enough around the edges. You can see it, I think, in the camera. Just a little bit of brown. And if it goes a little darker, that's fine. But these are going to solidify as they cool, and they're also going to continue to bake on this hot pan. So this is going to go to be cooled, and then we will cover these later. And I've worked with so many of these cookies, and I even roll them thicker than this. I have a really thick roll, even thicker than 1/4 inch. And when they have a lot of points and edges, they can get really hard to handle, but the more you handle, the easier it is. And then the last thing that goes in this cookie is an economy vanilla. This is imitation vanilla, 3.2 grams, it's clear. One of the reasons is this recipe was not intended to be artisan or to be fancy or to even have a lot of color. So using an economy vanilla is in keeping with these other ingredients and with the desired outcome of the cookie. So I always have imitation vanilla around, and that's what this recipe calls for. If you want to use real vanilla, that's fine, but if you're trying to make money, just think about what each one of these ingredients is doing. I'm going to sift the 10X. Like I said, the 10X is very lumpy. Sometimes it doesn't even matter the time of year. Right now, it doesn't seem humid, but it is. So I'm gonna take the fats and get them on the mixer on very, very low. I do not wanna aerate. I save my labels until I'm all done. If I've made a mistake, I can retrace my steps. Everything is getting colder, and we definitely want this to be warm and malleable. So temperature really matters, but I don't think I'm going to have to torch anything. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take this spatula and I'm going to sift this out and use the spatula to get the 10X through here. So there are a lot of lumps in here that I want to make sure to get out. So when you sift, and I say you always need to sift unless you're doing a yeast dough or a pie dough, is because you are incorporating ingredients in advance, you're taking out lumps, and in some cases you're beginning the aeration process. So I want to make sure to get all the fat out of here. A lot of people ask, how do you know you're getting everything? These recipes have been formulated that whatever's left in your deli cup is going to be okay, but you still want to get out as much as you possibly can. And I scaled all of my ingredients 3 days ago, so you can parse out all of your work. I'm just going to put this on 1. My goal is not to aerate it, it is to start to get it combined, but it does collect around the middle, so I might turn it on just to kind of whack it off of the middle. And it's cold. I'm going to pull my dries here because I'll be sifting those next. And we aren't aerating, so the creaming method is not putting fat and sugars into your bowl and whipping them and getting a ton of air. Even if you're looking to get air, you only want to do it on medium. We want this to be incorporated and soft, but not a lot of air, because air, remember, more air cells causes the dough to spread more in the oven. We don't want that. We want a nice, solid, firm, crisp edge on our cookies. So what I have to say about this whole situation is, because it's stuck on there, and it's pretty solid in terms of it's soft, but you want to make sure there are no residual lumps. If you begin to just add everything else, you have tiny little lumps in your shortening or in the butter, they'll never come out, ever. You'll be done because they'll still be there, and then you'll add the sugar or you'll add flour and you won't get rid of them. So at this stage, that's why I don't like dumping everything in the bowl. At this stage, you want to make sure that you have no lumps. You're going to scrape and look. When you scrape, yes, you're helping move things around, but you're also looking at this and evaluating what's going on in the bowl. So I don't really have any lumps, which is great. So I'm going to put it on low, and I'm going to add all of the sugar at once. There's no gluten in here to be developed. I'm going to turn it down so it doesn't sploosh everywhere. And I'm going to take my tammy and we're going to do the dry ingredients. So I'll stop it and use the paddle to just get the dry off the edges and get it going. And again, we're not going to whip it. So I have pastry flour, baking soda, which I know is lumpy, non-fat milk solids, and salt. Those are my dry ingredients. And in the creaming method, you generally cream your fats and sugars, and then you add dries and wets alternating, ending on dry. And that's what we're going to do. Right, so I'm just going to keep that spinning. Flour is going in here, the salt, and you can see the milk powder is most important in here because you really need to start to incorporate it. You don't want that lumping or clumping, and it can do that as soon as it hits moisture. And this should come right through the tammy, not like the 10X, which is very moist because sugar is hygroscopic. It's always looking to grab moisture. The flour is also, but not like sugar. It's not, sugar's your bully in the bowl. So make sure I have everything through here. Take a look, make sure this catches debris, things like that. These are my dries. And then I'll get my wet containers here and ready and waiting. Egg, whole milk, all room temperature, and my economy vanilla. All right, so I'm going to show you what's going on in the bowl. You can see how some of the shortening has been incorporated with the butter, and then you see white and yellow difference, right? And there's even powdered sugar on the edge. So I'm going to take my paddle and mix this, scrape the edge. Mix it around, and then because I want to give everything the best chance of incorporating without over mixing, because remember, we don't want to develop chewiness, texture. We want it to stay very tender. So I'm going to pull off of the beater what's here so that when I start adding things, I don't have to work the machine as much because I've kind of given it a head start. And I personally like to start with the vanilla just because it's usually a small quantity and it can help loosen up the fat. But again, this is not something I'm telling you to do. It's not always true. It's something to think about. So it's going to loosen up the fat just a little bit. I did a 5-pound batch in here today, and it's so full that I would break the dries into 3. Add dry, wet, ending on. But because this is smaller and it'll all fit in the bowl, I'm going to do half and half with this in the middle. So I'm going to pick up my dry ingredients and I'm going to add them on low, about half of them. And then very quickly, I'm going to add the milk. And I'm actually going to stop it to add the egg because it's such a small quantity. There's no reason to pour this in. It won't all come out. So I'm going to pour this in, and then I need to do a little bit of scraping, make sure I get as much out of here as possible. So once you start adding liquid to your flour, you start to develop gluten. You start to activate the baking soda. You start to do a lot. So you can see I've stopped the mixer, and I've added these ingredients, but this is what it looks like inside the bowl. Not a lot's happening yet, so I'm going to go ahead and scrape with my spatula the bottom. You can't do this if you overfill this bowl. It's a lot harder. So if you're going to make this, the reason I made this recipe, 500 grams, is because I wanted it to be able to be easy to handle. I can handle a lot in a bowl and not have it fly everywhere. But if you're new to this or you have a new mixer, but you want to probably start out with a smaller batch. I also think if you really want to learn the creaming method and how to control these ingredients, I believe it's really, really smart to scale this out 2 to 3 times and do it back to back versus doing a big batch and making a mistake or not really learning anything from it. Because the learning is like exponential from one to the next. I made this yesterday, made it today, and I'm making it now, and I'm just so much more familiar with it. Okay, you have a choice of adding the rest of the dry with it on low or with it off. Believe it or not, depending on how big you get, it really ploops. It really flies everywhere. So if you're going to add it with the machine off, you're probably going to want to toggle. This is how I don't put a towel over it or use one of those guards. You just toggle it on and off until it catches, and then you're good. So I don't want to overwork it. So once I see it starting to catch just a tiny bit, and I will show you what it looks like, I'm going to scrape the edges, and then I'm going to mix it until it's combined. I'm going to stop. So you can see there's a lot of flour stuck in places on the edges of the bowl and also on the paddle. So I'm going to clean up the edges, and I'm going to attend to the very bottom of the bowl and just make sure everything's up. Because the next time I move this paddle, it's only going to be for a moment. It's going to come together. This is it's a pretty dry dough. It's not a wet dough, and that's one of the reasons we can roll it out without flour being added. Okay. Now, if you're noticing, like I am, that it's not coming off the bottom, you just go ahead and stop it and scrape it. Sometimes if you have a really big batch, you'll dump it out and there will still be dry in the bottom, and what you want to do in that case is take it all out with the dry stuff, mix it in a little by hand, and put it back in and finish it. You need to get a really creamy, nice finish. It should start to pull away from the sides of the bowl and be really cohesive. That's the shortening and the balance of moisture. You can tell how firm it is already. So it's nice and dry. I think it's good. And what you're looking at is it cohesive? And I can see that there are no pieces that aren't incorporated. It's falling off. It's dry enough to come off the paddle, which I like. And let's see. So it's kind of interesting that you saw the cookies baked and now you're seeing the dough, because it is a light dough and it stays light. So get as much off there as you can. I'm going to take all of my ingredient labels because I'm done and it's all in here now, and I'm like this. I'll keep them. They'll be near me in my dish bin in case I have a problem. You can taste a tiny bit of the dough to make sure that you didn't miss something or you misscaled salt for sugar. It looks like things should be pretty good. I, for my home kitchen, use half sheet trays and half sheet silpats. I like a silpat because for pie making, for crusts, tart making, and for this cookie dough, roll out cookies, including the checkerboard cookies or other things we might do. This is your perfect tool to do that without having to add a lot or any flour. This is the front. I'm gonna put it upside down. And I just wipe the table so it kind of gives it a little bit of stick. But I also like to take a bowl scraper and remove the dough using this. So I take, because you know spatulas, even when you have a nice firm one, they're just not firm enough to get everything out, and you really want to use sharp movements so you don't stretch the dough and whatever, overwork it. It's just depends. So I'm going to take this bowl scraper and pull up the dough and get everything out of here like so. Okay. This side of my bowl scraper gets everything out, which is great. I could use my hands. I could just do this, or I can use the edges of the silpat to start to get it where it needs to go. Now, if you had 650 grams, you will see my other discs of dough fill up this whole thing. So in a commercial setting, if you make a giant batch of this, 1,000 grams will fill up in a sheeter, one disc of dough without plooping. And when you do this, what's nice, you don't want to use a metal bench knife like this on your silpat, but you can use this or this plastic King Arthur dough scraper. So let's say you roll it off the silpat, you can just pick it up and get it back on. So you can keep this edge really, really clean and control. If I owned a sheeter, I would put this dough in the sheeter between two silpats and I'd run it back and forth until the desired thickness, and that would go on a sheet tray and it would go in the freezer. Because I don't have a sheeter, I'm not going to use parchment. I'm just going to use two things. These are guides. Now I've seen rolling pins that have the guides. Those are fine. I don't like them because they're usually short and they're not wide enough for the dough. But if you have a really long rolling pin with those guides, you can use that, and you want to set them to 1/4 inch. But these are from Fat Daddy-O's. They make really fancy kinds for caramel. They're called caramel bars, and they're made out of metal, like stainless steel, maybe aluminum. They're very heavy, and you can get them in different thicknesses. These are made out of like foam core. I would like this to be thicker, but these are 1/4 inch, and I put them on the outside, not the inside. And I'll show you this. I usually use my tapered pin, but when you are trying to get uniform thickness, you have to use a straight rolling pin. This is a hard maple. You can see I've used it. You can see the fat is seeping in. That fat makes this naturally non-stick. And when I'm done with this, all I do is wipe it down. You don't put it in water. You don't use soap or anything. So I need to get this as far out as I can before I even begin worrying about how thick it is or if it's even. So I can use my hand, the heel of my hand, to start to get it out, but I'm shooting for this rectangular size. So I'm going to go back and forth, and you never want to use this part of your arm. When I see people doing this, it's very bad form. You want to have relaxed knees, like this, be relaxed, and you want to pick this up, and mostly you're going to set your rolling pin down in the middle and push outward, and then lightly pull it back in and push outward. You're not going back and forth. That's when things will stick. So I'm going to push this like that, pick it up, push it like that, and you'll also notice I never roll over the edge. You roll up to the edge and then you lift. Okay. I'm getting this as far out as I can before I think I need to check the thickness. So then I will take these two on both sides of the silpat, and this is plenty wide, and I will pull out. This is just gentle, and then I'll push this way. If this went over the edge, I would just clean some up, patch it in, and roll over it. So that's it. if I want to keep this perfectly straight for whatever reason, I can take the Silpat and do this and shape it. Sometimes you'll see people cut off the edges and add them in, you know, like this. You mostly just don't want to overwork it. So that's why I tend to do this, and then we put this back, roll it out, get it nice and smooth. But you can get it as straight as you need it. And you can control every bit of it if you just go really, really slow. There's no rush. And I didn't use any flour. Okay? If you want, for good measure, you can kind of go back and forth because sometimes thick parts can hide. All right. So that is on my Silpat. I'll put these under here. This Silpat is great in the freezer. It's good in the fridge. What I do is take the Silpat, put it on a tray, and then you take your parchment and you place it over the top. Now this is important because this is going to go in the freezer, and I'm going to show you how to flip sheets. I've got 3 in the refrigerator, and how important parchment becomes later. But the Silpat is your start, and I'm not going to try to get this dough off of there because it isn't firmed up yet. So even if I flipped it over and tried peeling off the Silpat, it might stick. So I'm gonna go get the other 2. Be right back. Okay, we're getting to some fun parts. Let me see how our cookies are doing. Yes, they're getting cool. So these are the cookies I made today. The exact same way that I just made the cookies for you. I made a larger batch, and I sheeted out 650 grams per sheet. And you can see how firm they are just since this afternoon. So I'm gonna pull these out. They're very easy to handle. And then these are going to be restacked and placed back in here. So I'm going to get a parchment. Here is what we will do. We will take this first one and we'll put the parchment down. And then I am going to remove the Silpat. I'm not going to lift it up. I'm going to lift it this way. That's it. If you lift it up, you risk it sticking and pulling it up. If you go with the dough, you'll have less problems. You'll have many fewer problems. So then I take this parchment. If for some reason this is not centered, and it actually kind of isn't, this is what you can do. Do you see how it's kind of leaning over the edge? Okay, so what I'm going to do is recenter the parchment so that it fits the way I want it to. I'm going to do this, make it stick, and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. And this is all ready to go into my pan. The reason you need this centered on the parchment is because now these are going to rest on here. And even if they're frozen, even if they're in the refrigerator, you don't want them leaning over. So for whatever reason, they're going to crack, slack, bend, that sort of thing. You want them all to be even. So this looks pretty even. I'm just going to flip it over. I'm going to remove the Silpat. This is a big piece. Make sure it's really stuck. And slide it onto here. Flip this over. Peel off the Silpat. Add parchment. It's straight. I like it. Add the parchment. And I can keep, if I have room in my freezer, I can keep this labeled with the date and what it is in my freezer flat. And because it's frozen, I can put other things on here. The other thing you can do is cut these out now, layer them like this and store them the same way. So let's say all of your circles are in here and you can label it 100 circles, 4-inch, or you can freeze them on trays and then bag them up, and you can put parchment, little parchment between them. So they're just in a Ziploc, and they'll take up even less space in your freezer. So there are a lot of ways to make room. So I'm going to wrap these up, and I'm going to go put them in the freezer because I don't think we're doing anything else to these. Okay, so these are going in the freezer. I'll be right back. So these are the cookies that I made earlier. They're raw. They've been in the freezer. Not super long, but here's what I'm going to do. I want parchment between these because they will stick, especially if they thaw. So you can cut it out and just put a little bit. But instead of doing that, I am going to fold my cookies in, create a little bit of a pocket situation here. This way, and my little guys. And then these can go into a Ziploc, into the freezer, or I can wrap them in plastic wrap and they'll go in the freezer. So I'm gonna go stick them in the freezer, I'll be right back. So you have options. You can either do the sheets and then worry about them later, or you can do the cutouts and they're done and ready to go as well. We're gonna coat these cookies in candy melts. I got mine, the white coating wafers from nuts.com, and they have real cocoa butter in them. I could not find them on the website today, so maybe they're just out, I don't know. They taste pretty good, and if you buy Wilton or you buy whatever you see on Amazon or Michael's, there's other brands, they don't taste very great. And the biggest difference I notice is the cheap, kind of icky ones. They don't have as good a flavor, and they're much more viscous, they're harder to work with, and they're not as glossy. So I really like this brand, but there are others, especially if you're going to a cake supply store or really digging around. But they come in these wafers. This is, even though it has cocoa butter, it's not considered chocolate because chocolate has to have a certain percentage of cocoa butter in it to be considered chocolate. If you read the label, it has sugar, cocoa butter, whole milk, non-fat dry milk, soy lecithin, which is an emulsifier, and vanilla for flavor, okay? I am going to put these all in here, all into this bowl. This will not go wasted if I only use a little bit because I can take all the soft melted candy melts and put them on a parchment, let it solidify, break it up, and put it in a deli and save it and just reuse them if it's clean. These are going to be melted in the microwave the way I do all chocolates. 45 seconds to start, stir, and then 15-second increments after. And oddly, you can still get this on nuts.com, but these are Paramount crystals. These are the fats that live inside the candy melt, hydrogenated palm oil and soy lecithin. But if you buy a brand that's really thick and clumpy and it's not melting, and you don't want to over melt candy melts because they just get thicker and bad, it's fat. This is basically like shortening made into little flakes. This is what you would add to this to help thin it out. This is going to give you snap. It's going to be very glossy. It's got good flavor. It doesn't interchange with the cookie. It gives you shelf life. But I like it's glossy. But it does reveal more of the indentations and maybe marks or mistakes you have on your cookie. So sometimes I'll take this and I'll piece together little bits that have broken off. And while imperfect, I really don't think anyone notices. So yes, it can be a really nice, smooth, glossy thing, but if it ends up a little bumpy, don't worry because you'll be covering it and decorating it. So I'm gonna put this in the microwave. We'll do 1 minute. I don't think I'm going to use the Paramount crystals because this is brand new and they should be fine. But if I have problems, that's what I'll do. When you do your cookies, you want to take all of them off the original baking sheet. You can use the same parchment, but you want to put them all into trays to consolidate because these are all spread out for baking, so you want to consolidate, and it doesn't matter what size they are. You're going to go through them and dip and flip all the way through, and then go back to the beginning and give them some sort of decoration. So I'll put gloves on to do this. If you don't have a microwave, you can melt these in a bain-marie or on a double boiler, but you need to be very careful that you do not get water in here. So when you put that bowl over water, it's going to get condensation and steam. So you're going to want a nice dry towel nearby and just make sure you don't get it. So look, there's not a lot going on here that it's softening. But with microwaves are weird, so you just want to make sure this is not sticking to the bottom because this is where you can get scorch happening. If this scorches, if you forget it, it turns black or smells scorched, you have to throw it away. You can't use it. You can't get rid of that smell, ever. That's why I go in bursts. This is the donut icing, okay? I don't have a ton of food colorings, and I didn't have red. I want to do red, orange, and yellow for fall, but for expediency, we're going to probably just do one anyway. Instead of buying a lot of dragées that are different sizes, I like to buy one container that has a lot of options. This will last you years. You don't want to use a ton of these. Some say they're not edible. You just put one in. Don't give it to someone who's got allergies or is elderly or super young. But generally they're not going to hurt you. But you can see you get the teeny tiny ones and the really large ones up here and these. These can look really cool, but you want to plan out where they go before you even start. These need to be stuck on right after you pipe. Every single time you pull your candy melts out of the microwave, you need to scrape the bottom and make sure nothing's sticky. I'm not stirring, I'm just moving everything from the bottom up to the top. Whenever I find those short little spatulas, I buy them for this because they can go in the microwave and they can go around and I don't have to keep taking them out. My microwave's super clean. You shouldn't have a bunch of scrape off marks on your bowl. Everything should stay clean while you're working. I just bought this a month ago that expires next year, the end of April. It's called Vanilla Artificially Flavored Heat and Ice Icing or Fondant. So this has got a couple different names. It's 5 pounds. I think it was $40. So you can either buy it and keep it until it gets old, which will be another year or so from now. And you can really use it for a lot of things. You can put it on bundt cakes, donuts, and whatever, but it's not natural. But it has attributes that I'm looking for that I like for this project. I love candy melts. I think they taste great. And I definitely like how they look on this cookie. And I like to buy one color. You can buy food colorings that work well with these kinds of chocolates, but I'd rather buy a really intense color that already exists, and then I add white to it to bring it down. But I always keep white around because you can always tint your donut icing. I'm like fundamentally against buckets and pre-made stuff, except when it comes to this cookie. I swear, I'm obsessed. So what lives inside this little guy? Let's read. Sugars have icing sugar, which is 10x, sugar, glucose syrup, water, modified palm oil, preservatives, which is sorbic acid, titanium dioxide, which is to make it white, and then artificial flavor. Yum. It can separate over time, and it does get sticky, so you want to keep it clean. This is turning chalky. It's acting weird. Once you expose this icing to air, it crusts up. So you have to work quickly, you have to have a plan. That's what it does when you get a donut. And when it's heated up and you dip a donut or something else into it, there's a moisture exchange. The temperature causes these two things to sort of fuse together, which is nice. It's acting very weird. See how chalky it is? Weird. I may end up having to add the Paramount crystals. I wonder if there's a date on here. I don't think I bought it that long ago. I've noticed nuts.com doesn't always have a date. We're gonna hang in there. It's not in jeopardy of getting scorched. All right. So if it's really old, if it's getting old, or if it's settled, it could be separated and you have to stir it. So let me get, yes, so can you see the liquid that's on top of here? That is a separation. And really what I should do is stir this all up and get it all incorporated, but because I didn't plan, that's not gonna happen. Of course, this is gonna act weird. Not good. Not good at all. Let me get some of the Paramount crystal. That was freshly opened. All right, let's do this. We need to get this puppy moving. All right, so let's just pull some of this out. The way that they make this is to basically chemically get so much sugar in here that it becomes glossy. And see how shiny and reflective it is? I'll just do one and we'll color one. So these Paramount crystals should begin to bring things together. Anything's lumpy or not working or coming together, it's just more fat. But I would not add Crisco or anything like that. I would definitely control whatever fat you're adding to make sure that your candy melts stay viscous. You know, part of this could be that it's cocoa butter instead of the cheap stuff. If you're using Wilton or anything like that, it's gonna come together so much easier, I promise. 15 more seconds is going to be the trick. Getting there, we're getting there. And I'm gonna add some food coloring to this. Okay, it's probably not a color we love. Okay, well, it's Halloween, right? We're gonna do like a blood red for real. Well, at least there'll be contrast. It's brown. You can see it's glossy, it's smooth, and it's pipeable. We're going to stick it in a plastic bag, no metal tip, and it's going to go in the microwave. It will firm up. You put it on the countertop, countertop's warm, it's gonna firm up. So it's gonna go in the microwave for 5 seconds at a time. All right, let's see if this is working. I just needed to work enough to do a couple of cookies. All right, so you're seeing the worst, and I always say thank you when people have problems because it helps everybody see that it's not the end of the world that if it happens to you. So I'm focusing on the center and bringing everything into the middle. I'm not gonna add more crystals until I ascertain that we're okay here. I'm going to just keep mixing without adding more heat to see what happens. It's starting to come together, but it's very odd. And when I was working in a commercial environment, I was in charge of ordering these. If I got a 50-pound box that I didn't like, you know, we would try to work through it as quickly as possible, and I would make sure I didn't get that brand again. So there will be times that you buy things and you don't like the color, the smell, the flavor, or the texture, and just don't buy them again. I mean, honestly, this almost makes me not want to recommend these. And I wondered today, why isn't it on their website? Possibly they're getting complaints like this. Such a pretty brown, isn't it? If your countertop is cool, it's really smart to have a trivet or just a towel so that you don't get temperature shock, especially if you're working on a stainless steel table. They're very cold. Still have some lumps in here, but I'm gonna give it a chance for the heat to distribute before I just put it back in the microwave. You can see the lumps. And I think I'll do one more 15-second blast and we'll be good to go. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're having problems. And candy melts, quite frankly, like I would prefer they don't have cocoa butter. These taste way better, and I know that. I did buy the Ghirardelli ones, and I didn't like their flavor. I didn't like, and it was very white. So if I were decorating cookies, I would get my gloves on, and then I would lift them up because they kind of stick. Move them like this. They need to have enough space so that once you coat them, they're not touching. But look how 2 trays fit on one. So then if you're working off one speed rack, you start at the top, work your way down, and then go back up to the top. First you do this. They're all lined up. You know how many you have. Maybe you do a pre-count, so you know each tray has 6 cookies on it, and you do the math. Makes it a lot easier. And then you coat them all top to bottom, and then you start at the top and you decorate. That way you always know these are the oldest, they've been sitting the longest, and you know where you are. And if someone else has to come in and relieve you, you've got a system. This stuff is really weird. All right, so nuts.com doesn't carry this anymore. I don't recommend it. And it's going to be a little bit lumpy, but we're going to move forward with this. If you keep heating this, you can sometimes just throw good after bad. It's not a good idea. So it's lumpy. You know what? Maybe I'll throw a little more of the, here. Let's get the lumps out. Let's see if I had to use this. I mean, I'm not gonna run back to the store. If you're in a pinch and it's this time of night and you have this order due tomorrow and you hadn't tested, you're gonna have to work it out. You can use Crisco, okay? In an emergency, pull out your Crisco or use your Sweetex if you don't have Paramount crystals. Don't keep the lumps in, but this is thinning out. Now the problem is it could get too thin, but I don't think it's going to. It's really sticking to the bottom. It really doesn't like the temperature shock, which is the cocoa butter. If you were just using all palm oils and stuff, you wouldn't have this kind of problem. So now I'm contemplating, should I put it back in the microwave just to knock out those lumps? Yes, I'm going to. Okay, so we still have some lumps, but we're gonna go ahead and just use this. So this is my pull off. This is where I'm going to scrape and kind of make a mess. So I'm right-handed. I am going to have my tray on this side, and I am going to start with, they're pretty soft. This is what the bottom looks like. Barely brown, barely. That's about how thick it is. I like to go thicker, a little bit thicker, but it's pretty soft. It's a matter of physics, tension. So you dip this in and pull back up sort of like this, and it pulls off what you need, and you turn it over You wipe off what you don't and you scrape it off and you just put it down. Don't worry if it's a little bit messy. You get into a rhythm, and when you do hundreds, you learn to be very efficient. By the time you get done doing them all, you know the texture. This is too thick, blah, blah, blah. So I'm gonna put it in like this. I'm gonna flip it over. That looks good. I don't even think I need to run this finger over, but what you can do if you have a bubble is tap it. Okay, so we'll leave that one like that. And then you can stir this occasionally. It might need to go into the microwave. You're in control. Flip it over. It has bubbles. That's why you don't want to whip this or over stir it. So I'm just going to take this finger and tap out the bubbles. And you can, yeah, there's lumps. So there should not be lumps in this. So this is how fast I would normally go. I would pull it up, there'd be too much on there. Flip it over, rest it down. And this will start to solidify right away. And you can decorate it without waiting for it to get super hard. So by the time you got to the top, you would be back on being able to pipe it. So you wouldn't be able to bag it, but you'd be able to pipe it. So this I'm actually not going to be reusing. I'm going to get rid of it. You have to remember it's very flowy. You're not going to be able to stop it, so it's on and off. So this is the best way to fill it up. That way I can get this in. So I'm going to squeeze all of this in here. So a lot of these jobs you can parse out. You don't have to do this all in one day. This icing is so much easier to use than royal icing, but you will never get a crisp edge like on a star or a rose or anything like that. It's going to flow. You're not going to get the detail that you would if you were doing like royal icing. It's a different concept. If you fill this up with, and this is one color, and I have brown, green, orange, yellow, and red for fall colors, I would twist it like so, put it into here, and maybe a couple of them, and put a lid on it and label it. It won't dry out, at least for a day. So you can prepare this the day before. You can do this the day before. They can sit on this tray overnight. It's all good. So then I'm going to cut a really tiny hole. When you're working with this, you want to start with the smallest hole you can, because you can always get bigger and it's going to flow very quickly. You don't want to squeeze it. You're just going to allow it to fall out of the bag. When you hold a pastry bag, this is that's everything. You're not squeezing, you do. Your whole hand's involved, but you want to eliminate wrist strain and finger strain by using this part of your hand. So this is going to go in here, and then I'm going to twist. And this holds it so that it doesn't come out the back. If you need a rubber band or one of those Wilton stoppers, they really work, and that's a great idea. But I can refill this throughout the whole evening if I'm decorating hundreds of cookies. I'm going to hold it like this, and I'm going to cut off just a little bit, and then I am going to see how big it is, and I'll just squeeze a little bit on here. That's how thin it is, okay? That's thin enough. You want to work near you, not across the tray, not way across the table. Move things so they're close by. I'm going to start with just an outline. This is off. This is on. This is the kind of icing that you are letting fall out of the bag. This is off. So this is going to start to firm up right away. If I want to dip this cookie in Jimmy's or sparkling sugar of any kind, or stick a dragée or any decorations, I need to do it now. If it gets too firm to come out at the end because it's solidified, put it in the microwave. So it says boo. But you see how it spreads out and gets shiny and kind of nice? I'm gonna go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. And then this is a little thick, but I'm gonna go ahead and do a line, do a heart. And then this, to keep it clean, is gonna go in here. And these are gonna firm up in an hour or so, and you should be able to bag them. And leave these overnight on the tray. They will firm up. The icing stays glossy, it just gets firm. So you can literally stack these cookies or bag them. So you'd have to think about what is your design going to include before you get started. What are your colors going to be? And you'd have to make a plan. And that is it. You should be able to do hundreds and hundreds of cookies or just 10. Okay? If you right now work for someone and you're like, hey, I'm going to do holiday cookies and we're gonna sell them. I mean, you can sell them $6, $8 a piece, but you have to make money. This recipe is gonna be cheaper. It's gonna help you make money. If you have a sheeter, you can bang out a lot really fast. And if you have a 20, 30, or 60 quart mixer, you can do even more. So these cookies are for industrial purposes. That's why I like making the 5-pound dough in my 4.5 quart mixer so that I can make my snowflake cookies and all my other stuff because I love making them every single year. Let people know that I'm out there. We're trying to change social media and make it a place where we can learn and share and have community, where people thinking, being considerate, all that sort of thing is valued. So everybody take care. Happy baking. Great seeing you all. Same time next week, we'll do dinner rolls. I'll be here and I hope you're all here as well. And let me know if you have any questions. Take care. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your week.